This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode number 169. Hard to believe, but here we are. What do you know? How you feeling after your journey back?
A tour after our tour and to Europe. So a little jet lagged. I just got off the plane basically.
Yeah, and you're going to get back on one on Friday afternoon.
On Friday. Yeah, exactly. And then on Sunday and then on Wednesday. So a lot of planes.
Here it goes. Yeah. Well, flying high, hit something in the air.
High again. Exactly.
What can I say? So Tim, I know that you've encountered this problem before, as we all have. And I just have to ask if you know, when you smell poop, is that because poop particles have gone up your nose? What do you think?
All
right. It's not.
I think there's gases that are kind of being released too, right?
Sure, there's gas. Okay, well, it's not an absolute scientific priority. However, I like these kind of stuff. One Australian doctor wanted to do a fairly basic test to see whether bacteria from passing gas could contaminate patients when she was operating on them. Okay, so she wanted to know whether she was contaminating the operating theater when she quietly farted in a sterile environment. And so she asked the doctor, and he goes, I really don't know. So they contacted a microbiologist. This is in Australia, in Canberra, and to come up with an experimental study. And, not all studies are completely sophisticated, but they did no doubt. The microbiologist had a friend, and he said, hey, we got to do this test. So I said, okay, look, we're going to do one fully clothed, and then once again with nothing between the anus and going to fart into a petri dish. In other words, well, a few inches from the anus. And so anyway, and it was, because the nurse that in question was constantly passing gas, and she was a bit worried that, she didn't want a poop particle to end up in somebody's gallbladder. So anyway, after the petri dishes were just gassed upon and left overnight to be analyzed, well, the petri dish that had received flatulence from the uncovered anus, it had sprouted a bit of visible lumps of two types of bacteria that are usually only found in the gut and on the skin. But the flatulence that made its way through the clothing before getting to the dish, no bacteria had sprouted. So the final conclusion was, don't fart naked near food.
Okay. So who does that?
I'm sure there's someone out there. So if you're inhaling the farts of a fully clothed person, and face it, when you're in a van with people, you're bound to do it, but just realize you're not really breathing in any kind of matter, just gas. But there are some smells, that get in the nose. I mean, for instance, now I would like them to investigate the smell of a dead body or a dead animal, because some of those scents, it does seem like they retain residence in the nasal cavities.
Well, your brain remembers it. So it could be the smell you could be far away from the odor, but you can't get it out of your head.
And well, exactly. And smell and memory have a lot to do with each other. I mean, I told you about having an olfactory visitation of somebody's ghost based on their smell, which was incredible.
So what's your favorite smelling room in the house? I think I know the answer.
In my house?
No, in general. You always, well, can I, spoiler alert, you always say you like basements.
Oh, I love the smell of basements and garages, especially if basements have dirt floors. Oh, and attics as well. I mean, an attic, when it has, especially, all wood, when it has that kind of musky, dead, not dead like death, but trapped smell. Look, as a child, I would often hide in this closet that was off the bathroom, and it had it was a little narrow thing, but in there, I don't know if it was cedar wood, but the smell of the wood was just very relaxing. I was in a crawl space because I'm a creep.
Roar. So let's see. I don't know if I can. Smells aren't part of this story, but however, although I could redirect it. I mean, there's a lot of bad smells right now in Sanibel Island, Florida, and all around there. You can't even go back. The residents aren't even allowed to be there right now. It's the whole causeway got destroyed. And that was supposed to be where I was going to go on my vacation, as I told you before. And of all places, like, okay, after all these tours and basically until after Thanksgiving, I'm like, I'm going to take a week off, go down there. And I was like, I'm going to choose Sanibel. It's like, it's fuck. So I have to rethink all this.
Yeah, well, understandable. I mean, and look, you know, it could be a very active season still. There's still time in the.
Oh yeah, the water is still
hurricane season.
very, very, very warm down there, and that's just jet fuel.
Well, I think there might be a hurricane coming up the other side, and then on the other side of Mexico now. But it's
really okay.
It's terrifying. I mean, there's just too many climate catastrophes happening.
Well, so speaking of vacations, Rod Saunders and his wife, Dr. Rachel Saunders, two scientists. They're from England, and they were down in South Africa, and they were camping.
Oh, I heard this is terrifying.
And just south of Durban, where basically 4 people murdered them and fed their bodies to crocodiles. So, and they arrested 4 people. There's these suspects, and 2 of which were known to kind of like hang and wave ISIS flags, even though they're not. They're like, even though they were kids or something. It's just like being rebels or something. They were really nothing to do with ISIS, but they just wanted to be bad or something.
You know, the price they put on human life is death, and there's a lot of dumb deaths going around right now. I mean, I can understand when people are so desperate they might need to rob something, rob someone, but I mean, in New York especially, there's so much random crime that has not even a poverty-based, more like a mental illness-based relation to it.
Exactly.
Craisins. Well, I don't know how you would have felt if you walked into a bathroom in your high school stall and found a coyote.
I saw that story.
And the thing is, the coyote was having a rather relaxed little sit there beside the
It looked scared. It looked scared. I felt bad. That was in middle school. Was that in Long Island? Where was that?
No, that was in California. That was in Riverside. I mean, I feel bad for coyotes because, you know, they want to be in the wild, but we've infringed upon them. So, I mean, what are you going to do? They're hungry. I told you this. I see the shame on a coyote's face when I saw him poop in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven. I'll never forget it. Anyway, I get another ridiculous death of 2 people. So a Massachusetts man was charged with murdering his mother, then setting her body on fire in front of her $900,000 Cape Cod home. But revenge, karma is a bitch. He choked to death on wet toilet paper in his jail cell. Now,
what? I think suicide attempt, I assume.
I guess he clogged his airways with wet toilet paper and suffered a medical emergency. And now, obviously, when you suffer a medical emergency in prison, don't be surprised if they don't come and save you.
Yeah, well, but yeah, the
what
toilet paper and clog. Yeah, so did he die? I'm sorry.
They did.
Okay. So in Utah, Dade Collins, he's kind of this outdoor adventure type guy. He was 40 feet up on a tree where his anchor branch broke and he went falling. But he lived. He broke all his vertebrae and he broke all his ribs, but he lived. But 40 feet, usually you're paralyzed. So he's lucky. But I don't know. Did you ever tree climb when you were a kid?
Well, I did. And as a matter of fact, I've just read a study about why cats don't break bones when they fall. Cats can fall from 40 feet.
Yeah.
And if it's the way that they torque their body and also that they're prepared for it, they usually don't break all of their bones or die. So, I mean, another reason why they have 9 lives. Now, moving on to insects.
Yes.
In Boston, a former eBay executive was sentenced on Thursday to almost 5 years in prison for leading a scheme to terrorize the creators of an online newspaper that included sending live spiders, cockroaches, and a funeral wreath and other disturbing deliveries to their home. David Steiner, who along with his wife was the target of the harassment campaign, told the court that eBay senior Director of Safety and Security, James Bow, and other eBay employees made their lives a living hell. And Steiner and his wife, they in fear that other companies would use this as a blueprint to go after journalists in the future. So, quote Steiner, this was bizarre, premeditated assault on our lives with buy-in at the highest levels of eBay. And the thing is, another executive at eBay was sentenced later to 2 years for his role in the same scheme. Yeah, because they were going after journalists that had some complaint. And the thing is, the other guy, Harville, one-time director of global resiliency, are among 7 former employees who have pleaded guilty to charges in this case. I mean, out of 7. Well, look, why am I questioning the stupidity of well-educated and high-powered men? This is the problem I see every time I open a newspaper, turn on the news, or
so what exactly were they doing? Just harassing?
They were bombarding them with live cockroaches and spiders and relentless pressure.
So weird. It's so weird.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. I mean, and look, I want to speak about dumb. We can speak about Herschel, the idiot. Why is he even running for a seat of power in Georgia? When
I don't know.
His son comes out and says, you have 4 different kids from 4 different women. You paid for an abortion. The woman has the card and the receipts. Now you want to ban abortion. I mean, this is just a perfect
brain damage.
Well, football player hypocrisy as well. Oh, I can, if my mistress needs to have an abortion, it's fine. Just, it's outlandish.
Did you hear, what about Chase Kaminsky and Jake Runyon? They got busted. There's a big Lake Erie fishing contest.
I did. I actually saw this today.
It cost like $800 to even enter. And the grand prize is like $30K. And these guys, people have been suspecting it for years. They started stuffing these fish through their mouths with lead weights. But they got it. They got a little sloppy this time around, and because they had these small fish that weigh like twice as much as a big fish. So people are like, something's up. That doesn't make any sense. They're stupid, basically. And they got busted, and
obviously
they charges.
You know what the punishment should have been? They should go on one of the deadliest catch boats for a couple of fucking months.
Now you're talking.
That's the Lydian method of justice. An eye for your ass, you idiot. That's a new T-shirt.
We drove directly over Greenland, but like the corner of it.
Drove?
Flew. That shows how fucked up. It shows how tired I am. But it was the most dramatic. I always kind of had a sense of what Greenland kind of looked like. You have this kind of rocky shore, and then all of a sudden it's just this wall of ice and the whole thing's covered in ice. And I really got an incredibly clear look at what that really was. It was gorgeous.
Because usually you're flying at night, right, over Greenland.
Well, if you're returning from, if you're going to Europe, you're returning back. But often I'm flying a little south of it.
Okay.
So I don't know why we went over.
How wonderful to see the glaciers before they're all fucking gone.
Yeah, no, really spectacular. So that was the thrill of my day.
Well, I mean, I'm planning on having quite a few thrills this coming weekend and week.
You're performing tomorrow, right?
No, I'm not performing. I'm having a conversation with Eugene Robinson.
Oh, you're having a conversation now.
A confrontation with Eugene Robinson, one of my favorite journalists and bizarre musicians. But no, I'm looking forward to our shows in Oakland on Sunday, hosted by John Waters, and Saturday, and then Sunday with Kid Congo, who I just got a copy of his new book in the mail today, Some New Kind of Kick. And then, of course, Zebulon in LA. And then, of course, going to Mexico City, which I did some interviews for today, and a lot of excitement there happening. So that's something to look forward to.
Well, I'll be there with you, and
you will be.
I probably will be excited.
Well, that's part of my rebellion against the death of this planet and every individual on it, is that I'm still kind of excited about shit, because I am just a ball of fucking energy and excitement. Anyway, this is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, episode number 169 with our special guest, Jozef van Wissem, the world-renowned lutenist. There's not many of them out there. And enjoy the episode. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our special guest, who's now on a massive tour and probably would like to remain that way as long as possible, is Jozef van Wissem, who's the world most renowned lutist, according to... I'm a luter, you're a lute. Is it lutenist?
Yeah, lutenist, yeah.
The world's most renowned lutenist, who's now on tour playing beautiful, medieval, sexy, modern, mysterious music. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're on this endless tour right now, which goes almost to the middle or end of December. How does that feel after the lockdown?
Oh, it feels really good. I was in lockdown for 2 years and I didn't play. I did some movie stuff, which, kind of saved me. But no, I was, really happy to see people again, and also after the show to talk to them, which I really missed,
When you're on this tour, is it all solo performances, you and your massively beautiful instrument? Or are you doing some collaborations along the way? Because you have collaborated with quite a few people. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Mm-hmm. No, it's mostly solo. I like to be on the road by myself and go by train mostly.
I understand.
Yeah,
I understand.
So let me ask you, what do you think of John Dolan? I mean, the last actual lute virtuoso, who also supposedly had polyphony before Bach, who could sing in the most radically rhythmic variations on top of his lute virtuoso playing. Is this someone that you actually admire?
I like his sort of state of mind. He has a thing where it's sort of like happiness and sadness kind of thing, this melancholy stuff. And I really like that. He's more like a Renaissance lute composer. I'm more, into Baroque stuff, which is later. So he's around 1600. So, yeah.
Let me challenge you on this. I mean, the lute is a handcuff with the virtuosity that's implied. Did you rebel against the virtuosity of this instrument, which is essentially, once you got into well-tempered tuning, it was eroded from modern music?
I don't think I rebelled against the virtuoso element of it. After all, I studied in New York with a great teacher. And in the beginning, I was really obsessed by the instrument, and so I studied the technique. But I came from guitar and from rock and roll, so
Right.
Sort of a backwards thing. I came from rock and roll, and then I started to study lute in New York with Pat O'Brien. He was also ex-guitar player, and he was a student of Reverend Gary Davis. So I still feel very, honored with this lineage. Anyway, so this means that there's more room for improvisation.
Well, also, Jozef, I must say, I don't need to hear more guitar. I need to hear more lute. I mean, there's so few in our realm, and which is great. What brought you to the lute itself?
My guitar player had a lute in her room, and she wouldn't let me touch it. And so it was all mysterious. And then she gave me this book, Music from Shakespeare's Time, to play on guitar, which was lute music. And that was sort of, was the introduction. And then later, when I got sick of noise guitar and noise bands and being in a band and that kind of stuff, which was quite late, I was in my 30s. And then, then I realized, then I remembered this book, and then I saw an ad in the Village Voice for Pat O'Brien, a lute teacher, and he was really open. And the first thing he said, like, if you want to make a living doing this, you have to write your own pieces for this instrument, which a classical teacher would never tell you that. So.
Well, a classical teacher couldn't tell you that because lute is pre-classical, and actually they know nothing about it. But I do appreciate this, because I'm not trying to fucking roast you on this one, that
virtuosity is an obsession that no one does, with the exception of some people in New England. I appreciate that you could even find an instrument like this to express yourself. In other words, you're a performer. Am I wrong? Are you a performer before you are a Renaissance medieval musician?
Yeah, I'm a performer, but I also like composing, and I like to have a strong idea of what I do. So it's not like I'm being reactive or so, it's more like I want to have a real strong idea, like a concept almost, to do a record or to do a show.
Well, you're a composer. I mean, as opposed to, I'll just use a very vague term, as opposed to a noise guitarist. Not that there aren't composers that are in that realm, but I mean, what you do is you are composing for this unique instrument and bringing kind of a very ancient art to the stage in a contemporary way.
Yeah, I try to update it too.
I would say that you are the same trajectory of a noise guitarist, because the Spanish guitar has nothing to do with the electric guitar, which led to the noise guitarist. And what you do has nothing to do with Renaissance and medieval lute playing. It's an abstraction on top of it, and that's very justified.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I disagree completely.
Okay,
absolutely.
I want to hear.
Absolutely the reverse. Yes,
really,
please.
Really.
Yes, step in. Now, Tim,
if Doland and fucking Ockegum have anything to do with you do?
Let him talk. You asked the question, which was incorrect. Go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
It's my compositions are based on pieces from solo classical pieces. So I call, I have a fancy term for it, sort of like medieval sampling, but basically it's just stealing from old solo classical lute repertoire. So, and I make it come back, the melody, like, for example, I play it backwards. I cut it down the middle, like a palindrome in a mirror image, for example, and I repeat that. And they're just like really simple melodies that are taken and stolen from, let's say, 1700s. And I repeat them, and that personalizes my music.
I love the fact of what you just said. And I read this also, that about playing things backwards, making a palindrome of them. And this is through composition, not necessarily sampling. You use the word sampling very vaguely. It's more of a compositional than a cut and paste term, which I find extremely fascinating. So you are basically knitting together just elements that you find or that inspire you, and then twisting them sideways, backwards, and upside down.
Comes from William Burroughs, his cut and paste technique that he does with literature. And I did the same thing when I made my first record, which was just all these classical pieces played backwards, but cut, like randomly. So it was called Retrograde, and people thought I was the village idiot.
Retrograde, we're retrovirus. All of it's very forward.
Did they think you were the village idiot? I mean, were you ever challenged on these things, like aggressively?
You mean like that I would in the morning meet somebody with a gun? No.
Don't ever play that lute again. Play it this way. Imagine, have you ever had a lutenist stalker? That would be amazing.
Not yet.
I could be the first.
Great. That's a great stalker. No, but in the beginning, it was not taken serious, and especially not by avant-garde people. And then later that changed, I guess, because of my collaborations with, let's say, out there avant-garde people, And my first collaborations were improvised with, improvisations, but now I don't do that so much.
Let me ask you this: Are you obsessed? Are you obsessed with the lute, or are you obsessed with something to exploit as a novel instrument from an ancient age? I'm serious about it, because the lute is actually pretty heavy with like pre-polyphony setup. Do you care about it? I don't care if you care about it. I'm not even being aggressive about it. I'm just curious. Do you actually care about the history of the lute, or do you saw that as a novel tool to express something to exploit as an angle?
Yeah, Tim, I'm gonna cut right into and say, do you consider your fucking hat a novelty that you exploit to keep your hair fluffy? All right, excuse me. Yes,
sorry, no, but I asked a very technical question.
I mean, it's a very perverse thing, to, but I mean, most obsessions are perverse.
I do know a little about, not a lot. I know a little about the lute.
You know a lot about obsession as well.
I know a little bit about Renaissance.
Let the man speak.
It's really simple. It's really simple because the work is historically informed, as they say, right? So I use that. I use history. I use history in my work, and that makes it interesting to me. It's really boring for me to play electric guitar, leads, for example. That's why I stopped that. I like feedback and abstract guitar, like I do with Jim Jarmusch. But I like that combination. I like the combination of noise and melody, like the really pretty lute, Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. But it's historically informed. So yeah, naturally, I'm very interested in history, and I play and I made a classical record too. So,
but you're not. Neither of you are answering my question, which is fine.
Oh, I'm going to answer it right now. That I think it's a very perverse thing to have an obsession with, and also I don't think one decides to pick up the lute as a novelty when, as he said,
I think they do.
I think you're full of shit. I do not believe anyone decides on such a unique instrument. And as you said, your first recording, they might have thought you were the village idiot because you made the lute cool again. It was not as if it was their way to, nobody else was doing this as far as I don't remember. I don't know everything about music, but I think that you took a really big chance because to just play the guitar well or not is what every idiot, as I said about guitarists before, guitars are like hemorrhoids. Every idiot gets one eventually.
Thank you.
Where did you get your first lute? Where do you even get a lute?
You have to go to a builder, and
it has to be. It's handmade, right?
It's handmade. He puts you on the list, and it takes a long time. It's probably a year or two or something before it's finished.
And is it made specifically to your size, to your demands? Yeah.
Really specifically for the size of your hands. If you have big hands, the lute is bigger.
How much does it weigh?
It weighs less than 5 kilos. It's very light. They used to build them really, for example, when Julian Bream played lute in the 70s, they were really heavy instruments, and they were built like guitars. And Julian Bream had sort of a almost guitar technique with the lute. Later that changed. With right hand technique, without nails, for example, which started in the 80s. So, and anyway, lute is, it's a very light instrument, and it's hard to play, I guess, and you have to, get into it, and then.
How many strings is your lute? Because they vary, correct? Am I wrong?
I have now I have 7 lutes. They're all different, and some have. For example, 10 course, they say 10 course lute, which is like 1 single and 9 doubles. So yeah, that's like 19 strings. I have one lute that has 14 course, and that's like 23 strings.
What do you think about the step into the age of well-tempered tuning? Like A440 is the now contemporary standard. Do you have any opinions on well-tempered tuning and pitch and frequency?
Like I said, the lute is 415. The only thing that I could say about that is that the frets are natural, so they move.
Of course, yep.
So sometimes it's a little off, which I really like. And
I do too.
People say sometimes, "Oh, you're playing out of tune," but I like being out of tune a little bit because
I've been playing out of tune my whole life.
That's where it gets interesting when it's out of tune, because when you play in a church, for example, with a lute, and the sound, you play one chord, you play a drone, one chord, it keeps going around, like around the acoustics, and it becomes a little bit percussive when it's out of tune. You don't get that when it's completely in tune. So it's nice to play with this, And if you have a great, let's say 7-second reverb in a church, I mean, you know, it's like you only have to play one chord and you can play it for 20 minutes, and it's like, you know, it's like
Well,
that.
the sound of the room becomes almost the second instrument.
Right, it's more about architecture that I do anyway. If you play the same songs, like if you play the same set, Lydia, if you play the same set every time, every day for, let's say, 3 months, like I'm sure you do.
No, I don't, but go ahead.
Oh, maybe you
I don't
change
go on
it
tour
anyway.
as long. I don't go on tour as long as you do in a
If
row.
you
But
play
go
the
ahead.
same songs, it becomes about the room, because the room changes the songs. Even though they're exactly the same, they can sound completely different.
It usually becomes about the guitar player in our case, which is usually Weasel Walter, who has his own dimension of virtuosity. Who was the first person that approached you to do a soundtrack? And by the way, I love the music, and this is what made me aware of you, was the music in Only Lovers Left Alive, the Jim Jarmusch film, which I think is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
The music as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I met Jim on the street in New York, and you know, I went to New York in '92. I had a bar in Holland, coffee shop, and I sold it, and it was kind of an intense life then. You know, I was sort of getting out of that. And anyway, I went to New York, and I met Jim on the street, on Prince Street. And I gave him a CD, and then he just, after that, he said he really liked it. But I guess maybe he already read about me in The Wire, because there was an article, and I know he reads The Wire. So, but anyway, we developed a friendship, and but the main thing which I tell people now about that is that because I do talks about scoring films, and I gave Jim music before it was shot, the film, So now that's what I do. I mean, because I did more. I just recently did 2 other films.
Well, wait, what is this latest project on Nosferatu?
Well, this is, I was asked by Cinémathèque Française in Paris to score the film and play it at the event for the restoration.
Oh, that's got to be, and that's just been released. Is that released now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's got to be beautiful. Well, what's strange is through Only Lovers Left Alive and through Cypress Grove, who's been doing for a decade or more now these tributes to Jeffrey Lee Pierce of the Gun Club, which I was on all of them, and there was one poem left. And I said, you know what? I love this soundtrack so much. I'm just going to do this poem to your music and see if they like it. And I guess you did. And then you actually did music for the poem. And Cypress Grove is working on the 4th installation of the Jeffrey Lee Pierce intro, of which we have a collaboration on.
That's great.
We'd never met before.
That's great. I saw the Gun Club many times in the 80s in the Vera Club. I actually saw you there, I think, too. Must have.
Well, probably. And also, Retrovirus will be playing with Kid Congo, who was in the Gun Club.
Very cool.
This coming Sunday.
And it's a very eerie text also, because you say the words death man, and of course I asked Jim to put some guitar on it, and everything fits really well together. It's really eerie, that this text, So.
And it was a Jeffrey Lee Pierce poem. It was like the last bit of writing left that he dredged up from the secret archives that he found. And I just altered some of the lyrics, slightly altered them, but it's very beautiful, and I can't wait. I guess Cypress Grove is doing the last installation for the record now. This is like 6 or 7 years in the making, though, this final tribute record.
Very excited about it, yeah.
Jozef, can I ask you a compositional question? With the repetition that you express, is it more rooted in minimalism or Afro-repetition, as Stockhausen would say? I mean, do you like dance music? Do you like repetitive music that's danceable, popular music?
To dance to or to listen to?
I'm interested in repetition, but not necessarily as a musical concept, I'm interested, for example, what Deleuze says about repetition. I on one record I quoted him like this long quote I don't know by heart, but anyway, I'm interested in things that, to me, it's more interesting if there's one or two chords being repeated for a long elongated time. It's like sort of being in a white room. You forget all sense of
It's
time.
hypnosis, musical hypnosis.
More interesting. It's more interesting than to play 1,000 notes. You know what I mean?
I do. I only sing 2 notes, and other people can sing 1,000 notes.
2 chords versus 1 chord. What do you prefer? I mean, 2 chords is kind of easy. It's a trap. 1 chord is kind of liberation in my eyes. I mean, do you prefer a 1 chord song or a 2 chord song?
I like a 1 chord song, like Lamont Young does a 1 chord song for 40 minutes. Or
he's not the only one, but yes, I like Lamont Young too.
Tim, you've been known to play 10 notes at once, so I'm going to ask a sideways question.
It doesn't matter because I'm a bass
Hang
player,
on.
and bass it determines whether it's 1 chord, or 2 chords, or 3 chords.
Okay, yes. If in your spare time, what are you listening to, and what do you never listen to?
I don't listen to orchestral works.
Which ones?
I don't listen to them.
You don't listen. Why not?
No. Otherwise, I listen to anything. Otherwise, I like, all kinds of stuff.
Depending on your mood.
Did you fall in love with music
I can listen to dance music too. And
can I ask you this, with all earnestness, did you fall in love with music through popular music as a child? Did you fall in love with music through popular music as a child?
As a child, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. My family played Johnny Cash, and I like his voice too, and that was a big influence, and it still is, so.
But you are a man in black.
Yeah. That makes this stand out more,
Yeah, right. Black on black. Paint it
black. Black on black.
Paint it black.
No, I like my family. Yeah, they were into country music, and
But as a teenager, what were you into?
As a teenager, guitar music.
Well, that's too vague. Come on, that's vague.
As a teenager, maybe the Velvet Underground when I was 14 or something, and then later Coil and stuff. Coil, Throbbing Gristle.
Well, Coil is orchestral in a very different sense. It's a different kind of orchestral.
Yeah, but
meaning it's the sound of angels being pierced by spears and then sent into a heavenly fire as they burn in ecstasy. Pardon me?
It has a folk element, no? Coil.
Yeah, I mean, Jozef, I don't think you're telling me the whole truth. I mean, I think these are all truths that you're telling me so far.
The truth
I think that you actually explored deeper, and your curiosity is deeper. Maybe it's not. Composers don't want to reveal these things, but are there esoteric things that you really love that you can expose and tell us about?
Yeah, let's just put it this way. What from the Velvet Underground took you then?
No, don't hijack that.
Hang on.
I want to hear this.
Excuse me. Did you go further into rock or further into esoteric?
Oh, okay.
I started out with listening to country blues when I was really young. Robert Johnson, Lead Belly, Big Bill Brunsey, that kind of stuff. And then, later after that, I started to listen to the Velvet Underground and more rock stuff. And then, I played in a new wave band when I was, I guess, 16, 17.
A new wave. Okay.
New wave, yeah. And, then I listened to that kind of stuff. What really influenced me when I was young, when I was 18, was to go to Ljubljana and meet Laibach. And I met their sort of aesthetics, this art band, really, and that sort of influenced me a lot. This really strong idea that they had about what they were doing and what it meant. And that was really, a big influence for me. Yeah.
I feel myself as a conceptualist. So is Leibach, and in a sense, absolutely, you are too. You are a conceptualist creating this alternative musical reality, which is only out there in your sphere at the moment. Which is why I'm happy to speak to you.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you. I'm very honored. I listened to Queen of Siam when it came out. So
well, that's a shock. Well, if you listen to it again, you might be shocked at how many nursery rhymes, how many nursery rhymes there are on that record, but how great Robert Quine was on guitar, of course. You said that you live between Rotterdam and Warsaw. I love Poland myself. Tim was just there. What draws you to Warsaw?
It's just something that happened, and that I got played there a few times, and I think I really have a love for Slavic countries, and it's just that the audience is really more dedicated to experimental music, I think, and for them going to a concert is more a listening experience and very special, more special than it is in the West, So, but anyway, I got, I think I can write better there because in Rotterdam I find a lot of books, and I'm into finding religious and satanic books and finding them, and in Poland I don't have that because there's no English books. So there I just concentrate on composing, and there's nothing there. It's just a bare room, and the architecture is also very dark and very gray. And I live in the block there, and it's fantastic. And it's not that sort of Werner Fassbinder kind of vibe, like that. I think Warsaw is the new Berlin, like it used to be.
Right. It's not, but it doesn't matter. But Miles Davis talks about it. There's a Miles Davis statue in Kielce between Krakow and Warsaw. He thought that respected him more than anything else. Let me challenge you on this, or let me ask you if you agree with this. Commodified sound and image is something that's very heavy in the West, and the fact that the infrastructure, although it's adapted to this, doesn't have the same infrastructure of bombardment of sound and image all the time to sell something. Do you think in Slavic cultures, which you claim you enjoy, it's because they're not checking out if you present something, they actually pay attention?
Yeah, it's also political. Anything you do there is political. If you go, I played in Russia and I played in Ukraine. I have friends on both sides. And it's, I have people from Ukraine staying in my house in Warsaw when this happened. I agree with that. I think they take it for the experiment, and they're,
Do you know any Polish? I'm going to say some of my favorite writers are Polish.
Mhm.
One of my favorite books, Witkowski, Witkiewicz, Bruno Schulz, Tadeusz Konwicki. They're amazing writers. And because there is still a lot of oppression in Slavic countries, art still is a controversial political act because it breaks from the compression and oppression of the people. My one improvisational 3-piece group, Medusa's Bed, we only play east of Vienna because of that very reason, because we feel that in the Slavic countries, they're just more open to something that's that weird.
But it's also,
we don't even bother with it anywhere else.
You only have to be yourself. You go there and you show these kids how to be free, really, and you don't do that to the West anymore. So this is the whole thing. You go there and people are oppressed. So if they see you doing your thing, to them it's freedom. It's a model too, a role model.
Do you get that many live gigs in the US? I mean, because I saw your tour list that's coming up, and there are more shows in Europe, whether it's the east or the west of Europe, or even Australia, than there are in America.
Yeah, no. When Trump happened, it was very difficult to, as a European with a work visa, to work there. And then I decided that I had so much work since, like, I don't know, the last 8 years in Europe, that I'm always touring. So it was just not possible to go back and forth to New York and having a show every time you enter. That's impossible. And so I couldn't really afford to keep the place in Greenpoint, So
it's one of the reasons I lived in Barcelona for 8 years, is because most of my shows were in Europe. I could do more of everything I do, and it just made sense.
Musicians go where they work, So I didn't. I lived in New York for a long time, and since the early '90s, and and I still have a lot of friends there. But I think as a touring circuit, it's not it's not that not that great.
Trust me, I know.
Not at all. How did you even have a place in Greenpoint?
I moved to Williamsburg in '92. There were only Hasidics and Puerto Ricans.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Then after, like, I don't know, 10 years or something, I moved out of there, and my friend, everybody lived in Greenpoint, the musicians. It was before this, before that became really expensive too, gentrification. And a friend of mine, he said, you can ask this landlord if you can, rent this apartment. Then I rented the apartment. Then Hurricane Sandy happened, and I moved from the bottom to the really nice apartment for $1,100 for an apartment in Greenpoint.
Hurricane Sandy is when I came back to New York to work with Retrovirus. I was like the last flight to get in.
Yeah.
Let me take it left field. Do you like hanging out with musicians? Who do you like to hang out with? Musicians or other people? Do you enjoy musicians' company?
No.
For the most part, neither do I.
I like visual artists because I can learn from them.
You can't learn from musicians at all?
No. They always have the same. Musicians always have the same subject, So
it's funny because
visual artists usually
visual artists
not you,
brother. Visual artists come to me the same complaint. They don't like hang out with visual artists. They like hang out with musicians. So maybe you're contrary.
I'll tell you, I lived with a visual artist for 7 years, and because the only thing I've ever painted is apartment walls. I have no idea how anyone can paint, because he was a precisionist. He could do portraits like photographs, and I could just not even imagine how that gets done. Now, the same way that I might not be able to imagine how anybody writes, a classical composition, because it's not within my realm, but I still understand music to some degree, even though I'm not a musician.
Yeah, I want to tell you one more thing. I work all the time, so I meet musicians all the time. So it's kind of logical that you prefer to hang out with writers or to hang out with non-musicians, because it's like your work.
I prefer writers.
Yeah, writers or filmmakers or visual art.
Fishmongers.
Can I ask? I'm going to do a dual question. Lydia Lunch and Jozef, what do you think of? What do you think of hanging out with actors?
I don't.
No.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't.
No, I don't know. No.
You hate actors, I hope.
Nobody.
I don't hate them, but
look, I'm not going to generalize about whole groups of people. I will generalize, because you do, but I don't.
I do. It's true. But
if they're method actors, I love hanging out with them, because then they're just like me.
So Jozef, you grew up in the Netherlands. What do you think of Paul Verhoeven?
Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah.
I made like 1 or 2 good films. Yeah. It's okay.
Really? You like a couple
Showgirls? That movie?
I like that one too.
Very funny.
Very funny. Very funny.
Intentionally bad.
Don't mansplain. I mean, the Dutch are good at that.
You live in Warsaw, in Poland, and some of my favorite films came from Roman Polanski, which would be Repulsion, Cul-de-sac, Death
Yeah.
and the Maiden, almost the Pianist, amazing with Adrian Brody. I mean, sorry about his political situation as a victimizer of the 70s and a
Yeah.
dirty little man, like there are so many, horrible. I will not hold his actions against his art because I
No.
still think Repulsion is one of, and The Tenant, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'll
Yeah.
go with Polanski. My vote's for
You
Polanski.
worked with Richard Kern. You did
What-
this movie with Richard Kern.
Well, which is really an homage to Polanski, The Right Side of My Brain.
They showed I think oh, okay, yeah. No, I like I'm into like Tarkovsky.
Oh, one of my favorites, absolutely.
You know, I think it's weird that now it's not cool to like Tarkovsky because of the Russian situation, you know, and it gets sort of hidden now. Like they will withdraw Tarkovsky festivals and stuff like that at this point, which I don't understand.
But what's the point of that they're withdrawing? What for what reason?
Because it's Russian.
Oh, again, you know, the issue with me, for instance, I'm going to Tel Aviv soon, which I've been to once before.
Yeah.
And the last time I went, I had to actually write a letter to the promoters because everybody was canceling because
Yeah.
of the political situation. I'm like, look, I don't believe in the politics of any frickin' country, especially my own. If I boycotted every place I politically boycott, I would never have a gig again in my life. I'm not holding it against the people that they're
Yeah.
prisoners, as we have been in almost every country in the world forever, of the political situation. I'm just not holding it against. I'm not going to hold the political situation against the artist, and I'm not going to hold the action of asshole artist against their art. I'm just not. You have to separate sometimes.
Yeah, you have to separate it.
What do you think of Eddie Van Halen?
Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
I
He's
never
a-
think about it.
No, he's a Dutch guy that's basically the collision of fucking Indonesia, imperialism from the Dutch. Obsessed with music, virtuosic playing, had to leave because the Dutch were such shitheads, and they moved to California with a professional musician with
And
an
then
immigrant
had one of
fucking
the
wife.
worst bands
No.
ever, Van
I don't,
Halen.
I don't give a fuck about that.
You
because-
love Van
because-
Halen. I don't.
Well, no, he's a virtuoso.
Who
Aesthetically-
cares?
Yeah.
Do you
No,
care?
but-
Joseph, do you care?
I do.
Well,
do.
it's
care
not your
about this.
pod. We're not talking about you today. We're talking about Joseph. You give a
Well-
shit about Eddie Van Halen?
No.
Never, not at all. Excuse me. Let me interrupt this diatribe of bullshit. Nobody gives a shit about Van Halen or Eddie Van Halen except for you, Tim. Keep it to yourself.
I disagree, but okay.
Yeah, well,
Tim, do you know this Dutch visual artist, Bas-Jan Ader?
No, I don't. Tell me about him.
He had this art piece where he went into a boat, you know, off the coast in California, and he disappeared. That was his artwork. Bas-Jan Ader, check it out.
And what do you think about it?
beyond Chris Burden is what I think.
Chris Burton.
What do you think about it?
The shooting thing. Yeah. I love that stuff. It's very melancholic. He made these like really short videos of like, for example, on his bike, he goes into the canal, he falls into the canal, and stuff like this.
Well, my favorite Dutch, some of my favorite Dutch, I don't even know what position to put them in as artists, are the Holbein brothers. Who
the whole
did
thing. Yeah.
who did the Dante organ, which were 50-foot high flames that they played like an organ, or the Suicide Machine. They're the Dutch version of Mark Pauline and Mark Pauline's, violent art. And they created this metal platform and got DuPont to create oil to coat people in so they could be roasted, rare, medium, or well done, by a flamethrower. And then they also had Stahlplatz, a very adventurous record label. Yeah. So and then I think one of the Holbein brothers became a bartender who deals with high chemical explosive cocktails. So burning you from the inside or the out. My kind of
We
art.
had some good Dutch people too.
I agree. I love being in Holland. I love playing. I don't play there enough. And of course, I'm very good friends with Babette van Loo, who's made many films. a Dutch filmmaker. Should have her on the show soon. So
Cool.
what happens after this massive tour you're on?
Then I'm going to find more esoteric books. No, after that, I will work on other films. I have, more soundtracks to do. And I did.
Well, if you ever need any voiceover narration, I'm submitting myself to.
I might take you up on that. I might take you up on that.
Absolutely submitting myself.
Yeah, I'm your biggest fan. I'm your biggest fan. I have your records here, actually. I have them here.
I'm a pretty big fan of that lute you play myself, my friend. I mean, you've recorded with Jarmusch, you've recorded with Zola Jesus. I think, hello, it might be time. And we have our secret recording. It will be out soon, though.
Yeah.
I think soundtracks are so important. They can make or break a film. They stand alone, and they don't really. It so matters to the film. And right now, actually, in television, in cable television, the music supervisors are so amazing because I'll hear things I don't even know what they are and look them up, and I'm like, this was just so perfect for that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, as opposed to a consistent soundtrack.
Yeah.
So what do you think about like Star Wars? I mean, this shit sucks, right? Yet you have this neo-romantic fraud, John Williams, and who's very competent, and then you have Foley artists, found sound recorders.
I doubt we've thought about Star Wars.
No,
I've never seen it and
Jozef,
don't care.
I think Jozef might have done this. I mean, Stockhausen was basically the influence on this shit.
I have never seen a Star Wars. I never
that's
will.
Fair,
I don't
that's
fucking
fair.
care.
You have to do it,
and nor will I listen to John
sound
Williams.
Is
Thank you
what
very
made
much.
that
the
difference.
About sound. Sound.
Yes.
It's very cool. It's very cool to make a soundtrack to a horror film. I always say now that horror films are more open to experiment and noise because, it's scary stuff. So you're inclined to be more experimental anyway. And it's more accepted because
it's especially important in horror films.
Yeah.
Because it could be scarier than what you're seeing.
Yeah. But it's also, and this is why I'm saying this, is that now, if they ask you for a movie soundtrack, they give you Spotify playlists, to imitate. It's really disgusting. And all the producers have so much power of what makes it into the film, musically speaking, that everything sounds the same. All these soundtracks, it's all based on the same stuff, and they sound.
But hang on, I haven't even seen a mainstream movie in I don't know how long anyway. So I wouldn't even know what the soundtrack is, other than occasional horror, and horror always disappoints me. I'm much more binge-worthy to true crime drama.
I'm gonna roll with Jozef.
What do you watch, Lydia? What kind of movies do you watch?
Forensics, true crime. Dahmer 10-part series by Ryan Murphy.
Dahmer, yeah. Cool.
I thought it was, all the women love it because they feel sad for the lonely Jeffrey Dahmer, but none of the men I know could get past the first episode. I only watch true crime. Horror it's not terrifying enough for me. It just doesn't.
Jozef, do you watch movies at all?
Yes, I watch a lot of movies.
You do?
Sometimes.
Why?
I watch. When I'm at home, I can watch 3 or 4 movies, in one session.
Well,
but from what period?
Oh, everything. Although I must say now I prefer documentaries more.
They're calming.
I don't know.
Well, no, actually, they can be the true horror because if it's a documentary about some of the criminality that's happening, both politically and physically, they can be absolutely terrifying.
I had, for example, a time where I watched every Hammer movie that was made.
You had to know what's there.
Yeah, like every Hammer film I saw.
Jozef, do you like being lazy?
Sorry?
Do you like being lazy? Do you enjoy being lazy? No, you don't. You don't at all.
Tim does.
No, I have.
He's admitted it.
I don't enjoy it.
He doesn't like it, but he is.
I enjoy it. What I'm saying is, you watch movies, which means it takes a lot of fucking time. So then how do you do what you do and watch a lot of movies?
Just you switch off and then you watch the movies.
Well, you have to feed the brain with something.
You don't think
Yeah.
movies suck? I mean, come on.
That doesn't look. Not all movies suck the same way.
Almost
not all
all do.
music sucks.
Almost all do.
All right, all right.
Almost
The
all do.
expert, the expert,
Almost
not
all
in,
movies
in
suck.
the expert, not in cinema. Tim Dahl, who would rather watch it.
Movies,
on a plane
movies
than
are
anything
way
else.
more rude than music because a song could be 3 minutes. A movie's a fucking hour and a half minimum. They're way more outrageous.
Well, Tim, if Tim, excuse me, if you're productive during the day, you need to let your brain rest, as opposed to other useless tasks you may chase after in the after hours.
I don't think.
Tim, let me ask you a question.
I'd love it.
You know, because
I'd love
you've
it.
been asking all these questions that I
Please.
don't, you know.
Please.
Anyway,
Relate
do you think Salo by Pasolini could have been made today and it would actually be shown
well,
in the movie?
non sequitur.
Do you think so?
If the answer is no, it couldn't, and I wish it would be because motherfuckers aren't brave enough. And that's my answer. They're not brave enough. It should be made. It's more significant now than ever.
Well, I'll tell you why it's significant. The same way that Desaad is significant, if anybody cares to read the Grove Press translations, is because what Desaad's point was all along, besides the proliferation of nonsense he did not do, was that the rich can fuck and kill anything they want to. And hello, Jeffrey Epstein. And hello, Trump, and hello, every other politician that is doing just that, not only to people, but the planet in general. Now, one of my favorite, I don't know, it's maybe 10 years old or more, is the French film Martyrs. I really recommend that. It is beyond Salo, and it is like 3 films in once, and it's horrifaction. It's a French director. I'm sorry, the name escapes me now because I'm thinking about too many other things. Martyrs.
Jozef, I'm going to respond to this again. Movies don't have the same cultural impact that they used to. So, like, Pasolini was basically murdered, as far as I know, and like it doesn't even matter anymore.
Well, in my opinion, maybe more musicians need to face the fucking guillotine. All right, this is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch. Tim Dahl, thank you very much. Jozef van Wissem, many soundtracks. The grand lutenist of the planet. Collaborator with Jim Jarmusch, my future collaborator, of course. I'm squeezing myself into that. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And continue to be as weird and wild.
Loved it,
Jozef.
Truly loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Thank you so much. Thank you
so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.